And Roger and Darlene Long are here with us for the roundtable this week, along with Dr. Rup Tandan from Fletcher Allen Healthcare in Burlington. Dr. Tandan is one of Roger's doctors. You are a neurologist, also a professor at the University of Vermont College of Medicine.
Yes.
And it is nice to have you here. And Darlene and Roger, it's good to have you here. And
It's nice to
nice that you could join us.
Good to be here.
People hear about Lou Gehrig's disease, but a lot of people may not still understand what ALS is and how it affects people.
Yeah. So the other name for ALS is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So it refers to the part of the brain and spinal cord where the disease hits people. And of course, Lou Gehrig was the famous baseball player who got the disease. So in about maybe a quarter of people, it begins with symptoms of slurred speech and difficulty with swallowing. And in the other 3/4, they may have weakness of a hand or their hands or their foot or their feet. So in about 3/4, it begins in the limbs. In about a quarter, it begins in what's called the bulbar distribution, which is the part of the brain that's called the bulb. So that's where it begins.
So it basically, the cells in the brain send signals to the spinal cord, and somehow this gets interrupted.
Correct. So these are motor neurons in the brainstem which supply nerves to the muscles of the face, the eyes, and the pharynx, and the neck and the larynx, and then motor neurons in the spinal cord, in the neck, and in the lower back that supply nerves that go to the muscles in the arms and the legs. So it's the motor neurons that undergo premature degeneration in this disease.
Is it hereditary?
It can be. In about maybe 10 to 15% of people, it can be hereditary.
And how does it affect patients?
It'll affect either their swallowing or their speech, and then ultimately both get affected in folks. And then from there, we know now that it progresses typically to the upper extremities, to the arms and the hands, and then subsequently to the legs. So there's a very orderly sequence of progression of the disease.
In my case, it actually started on my big toe on my left foot. And I was hunting and I couldn't shift my four-wheeler. And I didn't realize what it was. And then gradually my left leg weakened and my right arm. And so it affected those two first, and then it went to my right leg and my left arm. But it was, it was the type of thing where in the beginning you thought, well, geez, you're 60 years old. Maybe you're just getting old and you can't quite do the things you could do.
When did you realize it was something more?
Well, I loved to hunt and fish, and when I'd be up in the woods and I'd be hunting and I'd fall down and I couldn't get up. Then the diagnosis came through, and we've battled on from there.
And how long have you been battling it now?
Well, we know that the fall of 2008, but it was in January 2009 that he went hunting and couldn't get down or get up and needed his friends to help him. He went to the doctors. I mean, that was really, it was 8 times in one day. It was pretty significant. The doctor checked his oxygen, and his oxygen levels were low, and he thought that he might have asthma. So he was being treated for asthma. Now, we know that there's no one definitive test for ALS. They have to eliminate the others. So it took us a while to, I think in March he was a little discouraged because things were progressing. And that's when he started doing his own research, to figure out what it might be.
And is that frustrating because you go so many months not having a diagnosis and you're not really sure what it is?
I don't think it's that uncommon. It is frustrating. But we've talked with people that have gone a year or longer, and the symptoms can mimic so many other illnesses that it's hard to recognize it.
And is that critical time lost? Is that time that if treatment had started, it would make a big difference?
I think it's a very critical time because for many reasons. One is that you obviously want to give the person the correct diagnosis, if that's what it is. Secondly, there's one approved treatment for the disease now, FDA approved. And there's recent evidence coming out that the earlier people start taking that medication, the more the effect of that treatment will be in slowing down the progression of the disease.
Is there research going on now for other treatments that might be more effective?
Yes, and we are involved in that, and many other groups are involved. And I belong to a national consortium that is doing research with other treatments. And hopefully, if we are lucky, there will be an announcement about some other effective therapy soon.
Now, your research has to deal with weight management, how important it is for ALS patients to keep their weight on while they're battling the disease.
And basically their nutritional state. ALS patients who are malnourished don't do as well as patients who are adequately nourished. So there's a reason to consider studying nutrition, and that's what we've been doing in the last maybe 4 to 6 years or so. That'll be a big plus, to be able to tell people exactly how can they manage their nutrition.
And this is treatment. This helps prolong their lives. Are we getting closer to possibly understanding it enough to find a cure?
Well, yes, I think we are. If you look at the effect of nutritional maintenance in ALS, in biological terms, it is a much more significant effect than the effect of the approved medication that is available to the FDA.
The disease is relatively rare, but it seems around here we've heard of a number of cases involving people. Is there an unusually high number?
We know that there is a high incidence of cases coming from the Peru, the Plattsburgh, and the Shazy and the upstate New York area here. So what we are also doing is that we are working in collaboration with Dartmouth Medical School and looking at the effect of some of the compounds that may be prevalent in these areas around the lakes that may be responsible for the higher incidence of the disease in certain areas. And this is true not only in Vermont and New York, but also in other parts of the country, that people who live near big bodies of water, there's a higher incidence of ALS in those regions.
Some sort of environmental
environmental compound or toxin. So the area that we are looking at is to see if algae blooms that actually proliferate in the lake waters, in the bays of the lake, in some way responsible for this higher incidence of the disease in communities around the lake here.
Is the thought that the people who are affected don't necessarily have to go into the lake and be exposed directly to the algae bloom?
Correct. It could be in the atmosphere, it could be in the water, it could be in any other way they could have been exposed to that.
If you're able to identify a particular chemical or compound in the algae, where does it go from there?
Yeah. So I think it's like in any other sort of breakthrough in science, that once you identify a pathway, and once you know that this pathway is in any way diseased or affected, then you have to study the steps in that pathway and see where along that pathway is there that block that leads to the disease. And then you figure out mechanisms of circumventing that pathway.
And that would be a major advancement. Is that still at least a few years away?
That's still a few years away. The first thing is to identify a link.
Roger, how are you coping with this?
Well, in the beginning, the first couple of weeks, it took a while to get my brain wrapped around it. There was no question about that. But after that, we made a decision that, we could make the best of it and fight and do the best we could. We formed a foundation, and we are being proactive, and we are trying to fight in every way we can.
You're trying to raise awareness, and this has become important to you as well, to really inform people about the disease and how it's impacting a pretty large number of people here in the region.
When we started finding out how many cases of ALS were in this area, how many people we knew, we realized that this was much bigger than our circumstances. And people came out, and we have heard from so many that they found comfort in being involved in fighting back. And with every newspaper article, with every bit of publicity, we get more phone calls of somebody else. We've been told since January of 5 more since last August. It's just amazing how prevalent it is in this area. I don't think we had any clue.
No, we didn't have any clue.
No. And people want to be able to do something. They want to support this work.
And as we saw, as we mentioned at the top of this roundtable, Josh Jabut wanted to help you. He's a friend of your daughter's, and he's raising awareness and raising critical dollars by running in the Boston Marathon earlier this week.
Oh, it's very humbling.
It's very humbling to have someone like Josh do that. We've also we've had 2 golf tournaments in the last 2 years.
Another one planned for this July.
We have a motorcycle rally that's going to be going on this summer. So there's quite a lot that we're trying to do.
Not only to raise research dollars to continue the work, but also to let people know about this.
Correct. Early in our association with Dr. Tandan, I asked him what could we do as a patient that would help with the disease, and he said two things: call your congressman and senator. And I said, Doctor, why would I do that? He said, we have no funds for research.
Yeah.
So you know, that's a critical part. We know our government's upside down, and we know it's tough for them to fund things. So we need to take that upon ourselves.
You can find out more about Dr. Tandan's research through the University of Vermont's College of Medicine. And here's how you can donate to ALS Research. You'll find all of this info on our webpage at mountainlake.org.